Good evening and welcome to the September 2024 Policy Committee meeting. Madam Chairperson, do you wish to call the meeting to order?
I do.
Thank you. I'll move for roll call. Ms. Walkman? Not here. Ms. Witset?
Here.
Ms. Williams?
Here.
Ms. Delay?
Here.
And Ms. Holbert is joining us this evening. Who is not on the committee, but is joining us as a board member. Thank you. To review our protocols for the meeting. Oh, there we go. Just to review those, all committee meetings are run by central office administrators. Board members will hold questions through each policy item. So we'll review the policy and then any questions that they have, we will address. Community and public comment and questions will occur next. And then where possible, community members' questions, comments will be addressed by the appropriate administrator if we are able to do so. At this time, we would move to, Ms. Walkman's here. Thank you. We'll mark you present for the record.
Yeah, we'll have Michelle. I apologize so much. But Michelle.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Next, we will need to approve our minutes from the June meeting. Do I have a motion to approve the June minutes?
So
Thank you. Okay. Having done that, we will move to our open policies for first read. This clicker is not liking me this evening. Before I wore it out. Okay, so we are going to move into the policy reading. We'll start with policy 803 for a first reading. Ms. Gallagher is going to walk us through those. And all of the committee members should have received those earlier in the week.
Sorry, I think I apologize. This is not normal space where we have our committee meetings, so our technology is a little off from where we normally are.
for those of you who might be unfamiliar with, she is a district solicitor as well. So she's filling in for Mr. Diazio tonight.
So this policy is being revised because of a change.
This policy is being revised because of a change in the school code, which now allows school districts to have district instruction to be 180 days or 900 hours of instruction, or at the elementary level and 990 hours at the secondary level. So this just incorporates that change within the school code. Any questions about this?
Not necessarily a question about the policy per se, but I just wanted to circle back to a topic that was discussed when we last approved the school calendar in May of last school year. So we had discussed the possibility of adding administrative regulations. There was discussion at the time. Community members came and spoke about, could there be a way to more intentionally incorporate recognition of important religious and cultural celebrations and holidays? And there was quite a bit of discussion about that. And we talked about the possibility of an administrative regulation that could maybe inform day-to-day operations, such as scheduling of tests and what have you. And so I recognize we wouldn't vote on, and we don't need to vote on an administrative regulation. But I didn't want it to get lost in the discussion. So I just wanted to maybe bring Dr. Baddick and Dr. Scanlon up to speed with what was discussed. I also believe that I think this will be a topic at our Ed Affairs Committee meeting as well. So perhaps, that's another avenue for discussion, but I just wanted to make sure that we bring that back to the table at some point. So about the policy itself, no, thank you.
All right, Ms. Walkman?
No comments.
Okay. Ms. Witczak?
No comment.
And I have no comments either, so Ms. Holbert?
No.
Okay, then I think we're good to put it as a first reading to the board.
Actually, one thing real quickly, just to clarify, the reason that we're doing this is because there has been a shift in the way that we can meet our state requirement, correct? So
That's correct.
just to sort of, so the community understands why we're revising this policy, so we can move from looking at days only to also acknowledging hours in lieu of that. Is that correct?
That's
Okay.
exactly right.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. We'll put that on the agenda for first read. Policy 807, opening exercises and flag displays.
This is another proposed revision because of a change in the school code, which now requires school districts to have a moment of silence for the anniversary of September 11th. Any questions on this?
Ms. Dolly?
No, I don't think.
Okay. Mrs. Walkman?
No.
Ms. Witczak?
No, but I just want to make sure that students that don't participate in saluting the flag for religious or cultural reasons, that they're not obligated. They need to give respect to the students that are participating, but they're not required to.
That's correct, and it specifically says, while respecting the rights of individuals. So yes, I think that's taken into consideration.
I have no questions or comments either. Mrs. Holbert?
Just in case, this also, I think this was part of the large budget agreement that came out over the summer, that there was a little piece in there that required all school districts to essentially put this in their policy that there will be a moment of silence on September 11th. So just to make sure that's clear for the community.
Yes, this is a change in the Pennsylvania school code, so it requires school districts to incorporate this in their policies by law.
All right, so I think we're good with that.
Okay, we will move that to a first read. And then policy 103, discrimination and harassment affecting students and the accompanying AR.
So this is another change in federal law. The Title IX regulations were changed in April, which now requires school districts to incorporate additional protected classifications based on gender identity. So that has been now added to the policy. And this also lays out the process for reporting requirements and how cases will be handled in the policy and administrative regulations. So another change in the law which prompted this policy. And I'm happy to answer any questions about specifics.
Ms. Dolly?
So I have two questions. One, I just wanted to clarify, there's probably very little wiggle room in the language of this policy. Is that correct? In terms of it's required for us to have it. So, you know, in terms of any kind of leeway we have to change the wording or anything like that, it's kind of prescribed in large part. Is that correct?
The protected classifications are prescribed. They would be legal terms prescribed by law.
Okay, okay. And I had another just general question. How does this differ from another policy we have, policy 248, the unlawful harassment? Can you just explain that a little bit?
That's a great question. And there may be a time where the administration recommends that policy be repealed because some of the definitions as we're working on them will likely be incorporated in all of this. So there may be grounds to potentially repeal that in the
So it's
future.
it would be redundant then.
Exactly.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
That's a great question.
Ms. Walkman?
No comments at this time or questions.
Ms. Woodsett?
I have, I had, typed in a few edits. I don't know if they came up. But throughout the policy, it says shall. It uses the word shall, which I feel is a passive, makes it a passive statement, and it should be switched to will as a declaration, like there is no wiggle room. Because shall sometimes can get mixed up in the minutia and not be carried out. So when you switch the shells where it is throughout the policy to will, it makes it more of a declaration of that's what will happen. Because it's serious. This is also built into harassment, racial harassment. And we know that that is happening in the middle school and the high school. And it's been left up to the principals to decide how it's being handled. And in many times from people in my community, I've been told that there hasn't been any satisfaction, that the perpetrator was let off as if they didn't understand what they were saying or they were doing, and there was no consequence. And I think it should just be zero tolerance in the AR, as well as changing the wills to the shell, the shells to the will. I don't know if you can do that, but it's just the type correction and the fact that there should be clear consequences written out, that this is what will happen. You will have suspension, you will be.
Yeah, so
So Ms. Whit said, actually, in the legal jargon, shall is more powerful than will. Shall means it absolutely, that is what will happen.
So this is a legal document?
Well, all of our policies are, yes, but shall from a legal, when you're talking about legal jargon, contract language, shall is a more powerful word than will.
Oh, well, that's news to me.
Yeah, yeah. So,
Yeah,
sorry.
the wording in policies when you have may in there is what gets kind of nebulous. So shall and will mean that you must follow whatever in that policy. Yes.
Okay. Well, I stand corrected. But I still think that in the AR, there should be a reference to zero tolerance, that this is not going to occur in the schools and it's not going to be tolerated. And that the consequence is not clearly defined. It's still left up to the discretion of the principal. And I don't think that it should. It should go to the superintendent or his designee, because that's a violent act against an underprivileged, underserved population in the school that already feels on the outskirts.
Yeah, there are, with any kind of harassment, whether it's racial harassment, sexual harassment, or any kind of gender identity harassment, there needs to be some, obviously an investigation with that. There needs to be consequences. And the third part that is not really in the policy is something that a restorative piece for the reentry plan, for what caused it. And that's a piece that we need to work at administratively and with our staff. Yes.
Okay, so can that be done before the policy goes to first read?
Well, the policy, I mean, it's going to first read. Those pieces I think are something as I work with principals and have some we need to have consistency in how we follow the policy. I think the policy is pretty clear and pretty well written. It's a matter of being consistent with following it. And that's really up to the superintendent and the administrators to do that.
But will they do it if it's not written in the policy?
They'll I think they will do it if, you know, if I certainly have this as a topic for us to talk about at our next principals meeting. Because it's something that I want to make sure we're consistent, at least as long as I'm here, to make sure that we're consistent with those policies and implementing them and following. Yes.
Are you good, Ms. with that?
Oh, not really, but.
Okay. Ms. Wyman?
To your point, I think one of the things that I would be looking to do moving forward in the proper venue, I'm not sure which committee that might be, because it could go across perhaps many, maybe it's here. But I think the board routinely asking for data around enforcement of the policy, around disproportionality in students who are impacted by harassment and so forth, and that kind of data for us to understand what is happening would be something I'd like to see moving forward. I don't necessarily think that itself needs to be in the policy. The question, to your point, is does something like that, board expectations around reporting, around the enforcement of the policy need to be spelled out in the AR? That is not something that we've typically done. I'm not sure if I have a strong feeling either way at the moment, knowing that it's something that I would want to see. So I'm kind of like going back and forth because I hear where you're going, and I think we need to do something more than we've done as a board. And I think that's probably the best way to do it, is to ask for that data and understand what's happening. But where that goes is my question.
Can I piggyback on that real quick, just to say that, is there anything that we could add or tweak in the administrative regulation that would make it easier for and more clear for admin to fulfill what is expected? Is that?
Yeah, what with administrative regulations, it's up to the board to pass the policy. And a lot of policies will then designate the superintendent to develop administrative regulations. Those regulations are done by the administration for many reasons. One, you have to make sure that what you're saying you can actually do. Two, if law changes or some of the state or federal regulations change, we can change those in our administrative regulations without having to go through a whole board policy process. Or if we determine that we need to make some tweaks in our regulations and how we're doing that, we can do that administratively, and it doesn't require the 2 reading process to go through the policy. So the administrative regs, board says, here's the policy, here are the guidelines to follow. Superintendent, go develop those regulations and work with your team and your staff to do that. And then if you need to make changes to that, you can do that, because the policy just designates the superintendent to develop those regulations, if that makes sense. Yeah.
All right. And so I guess what I'm hearing you say is that you think this policy is sound and that it gives us what we need for now, and then we can always go back and amend ARs if we need, but we need to enforce and follow it. Right. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Thank you. And Mrs. Holbert, do you have any questions?
No, I think your entire discussion is kind of.
Okay. So are we ready? We're ready to put this to a first reading then? No, you? No.
What would you suggest?
I think that that somewhere it needs to say in the AR exactly what Dr. Scanlon has said, that it will be discussed with the principals to enforce the consequence policy and to record the data accurately, so that nothing is hidden in the sake of transparency, and that's something that has been missing in the district, that the documentation has not been done. So therefore, going back to look at Pat's data, it's a little off because it hasn't been reported for whatever reason.
I can add one note too, and some of the administrative regulation has been revised, and this administrative regulation, if you take a look at this highlighted sentence or underlined sentence, does require that all school employees notify a suspected violation of this policy to the Title IX coordinator. So that is a requirement in the AR amongst school employees.
But who is the Title I coordinator? That's a question that I had. Oh, okay.
Title IX, yeah, the lucky one in the room, Title IX, yes, that's me.
All right, okay, so we'll just vote to push this to a first reading. Do you want to call?
Sure. So we want to get verification from the committee that they are comfortable moving policy 103, discrimination and harassment affecting students, and the accompanying AR to a first read for the board.
Kelly had thrown out the idea of adding some sort of data capture phrase to it. Is that something that we would consider at this point, or?
Is that something that'll come after the first read and before the second? I think that,
I think for now, we go with this as our first read, and then we can take our considerations before we come back to the second read. Would you agree?
Yeah, we can certainly take this input and look at our administrative regulations. There is a reporting requirement whenever we have a discipline infraction that we do report into Power School, I believe is our student information system. So we have those coded. And they are entered into Power School as whatever infraction it would be.
but the Power School is something that just recently started, so how are you going back 5 years worth of data?
I'm not sure what system we've had
Power School.
prior to
for
Power
years.
School, but it seems like we've had that
Yeah,
for a couple of years, right?
And
School-
remember that,
Schoology is new.
Oh,
Power School is what we've had.
okay.
remember you also get a report at the end of each year from from our safety coordinator. So she would report out on that as well. So that's minimally once a year that you are getting that data.
Okay.
All right, so are we ready to vote? Okay.
Okay, so we'll move that policy forward. Next policy up for discussion is policy 104, discrimination harassment affecting staff. So very similar, but for a different group of district community members.
Yes, so the policy 104, 103 impacts students, 104 is non-discrimination in employment practices. So it's essentially an identical policy. With those Title IX changes, we incorporated the additional protected classifications, and the policy is very similar to 103. It just has that employment distinction. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Ms. Dole? Okay. Mrs. Watman?
No.
Ms. Witczak?
No.
Okay. I don't know either, since it's so similar to the first, so, right, exactly, just for employees. Ms. Holbert? No. All right, so we're good to move this to a first reading? Okay, yep, good to go.
Great, thank you very much. We're going to modify the agenda a little bit this evening. Typically, and what's on there right now is to move to discussion of electronic devices. What we'd like to do instead is give an opportunity for public comments. So if anyone has comments or questions regarding the policies that we've just discussed, now would be a time to approach the podium with any questions. If there are none, then we can move on to the other discussion item, which is on electronic devices. And so again, on the agenda for this evening, we've included the policy as well as the AR for discussion, and I'll turn it over to Ms. Williams.
Okay, Thank you all for coming. We've gotten lots of emails from Haven Hold the Phone, so we're excited to see everybody out. This is the biggest meeting I think I've ever seen. So kudos to you for organizing. So I just want to remind you, we don't necessarily have a hard time limit tonight, but just be respectful that there are lots of us in the room, and I think that most of you probably share a lot of the same viewpoints. So definitely, like I said, just kind of be respectful of other people's times. And also, we wanted you to know that this is just our first step on this. We are not changing the policy tonight, but it is the first step on the road to revising, or changing the policy. So we hope to have other venues for public comment to come and weigh in on this as well. I think that this is a fairly, this is the first pass from you as well to us. So we want to make sure that we're transparent and give the community ample opportunity to weigh in. So having said that, when you go to the podium, if you would please give your name and the street that you live on. You must be a taxpayer, resident of the district to speak. And otherwise, we are looking forward to hearing from you. So go for it. Yeah, go right ahead, right to the podium, right in the corner there. And just make sure the mic's so we can hear you.
Organized.
I just have 45 minutes of comments. Thank you. Well, thank you. My name is John Christodoulius of Swarthmore, 7 Village Greens Lane. I have one child in SRS, one in the middle school and one in the high school. I'm speaking on behalf of Haven Hold the Phone, which is a group of parents representing all 5 schools. Including me, we have 4 representatives here who will be making comments. We would like to propose a set of changes we think will improve the district's electronic device policy, a set of changes in aggregate known as off and away all day. Basha Silverman and Alex Bird Becker will briefly summarize off and away all day, which has been implemented with great success in numerous districts around the country. At the same time, we know that there are legitimate concerns about such a policy. Carla Testa will briefly address how a policy can mitigate some of the most common concerns that students, parents, teachers, and administrators might have. But first, we'd like to acknowledge the good work that the committee did in 2022. When we adopted the initial version of the electronic device policy, we were hopeful. Many parents were hopeful that this would lead to a change in the way that cell phones were dominating life in our schools. But we have learned a lot since that initial implementation, both about the negative effects about electronic devices in our schools, but also about how challenging it is to implement and enforce such a policy. In particular, a policy that allows our middle school and high school kids to have devices on their persons using them during non-instructional time. We have submitted or are about to submit a more detailed memo describing to the committee the evolving research on the deleterious impacts of devices in schools, the details of an off and away all day policy and how it could be implemented and even how it could be financed. It's worth highlighting one aspect of our memo, and that is the overwhelming response we have received from WSSD teachers we have surveyed. 48 of 50 teachers, 96% of the teachers who responded to us told us that they are supportive of more restrictive electronic device policy. Reading the comments from the teachers is heartbreaking. I would like to read all of those comments to the committee, but of course there is no time to do that. So instead, I'll just take 4 representative examples. One high school teacher said, quote, "A majority of students are heavily distracted by their cell phones. In most cases, cell phone use interferes with learning and classroom community." Another middle school teacher said, "Outside of being a huge distraction to students and staff, it also contributes to bullying and other acts of hate. Eliminating the use of cameras, access to the internet, and any forms of social media would greatly improve everyone's overall experience inside the building." Another teacher said, "This is the most pressing and actionable problem presently in our schools. It is the single most disruptive force in education." And finally, one teacher sent an emphatic, quote, "Ban the phones, please." So thank you for your service and kind attention.
Thank you.
Hello, committee. My name is Basha Silverman. I live at 563 Marietta. Was I supposed to do the address too? Just the street? Okay, great. Now we just told the whole world where I live. Okay. I have two daughters in the district, one at SRS and another at our middle school. Over the past few months, we have watched our nation respond to the growing published research on kids, cell phones, and social media, as well as the Surgeon General's warning underscoring concerns about the impact of digital technology on the lives of our students. States such as California, Florida, Ohio, and Indiana have passed legislation requiring school districts to restrict cell phone use in schools through comprehensive and enforceable policies. We wanted to hear about how this is going in those various districts, big and small. So we reached out to them. We reached out to superintendents, school board presidents, and principals. Their contact information is publicly available on their respective district websites. Much to our appreciation, we received a significant response. Many emailed us lengthy descriptions of what they did, why they did it, and how it works. We were also graciously invited to meet with them via phone and video. At our request, all of them shared copies of their policies and resolutions, which we have filed and shared with you for your review. It's worth highlighting that across most of these communities, school officials and board representatives were the driving force behind these policy changes, rather than concerned parents or vocal community members. In addition to collecting this qualitative data, our small group also, actually we're pretty large, also completed a policy landscape analysis of existing phone policies nationwide. There is a clear trend. Those communities that have taken measures to revise their policy as off and away all day have already seen dramatic improvement in their school community, increased attentiveness, a reduction in distractions, fewer fights, and an overall sense of relief and gratitude from teachers who no longer have to police phone use. We have found that the most successful policies are the most restrictive ones and take the onus off of teachers to constantly police students about putting phones away. Overwhelmingly, they have adopted the locked pouch system Yonder. Now, let me share two brief success stories that have informed our thinking. In a Virginia school district, using Yonder pouches has, to quote the deputy superintendent, changed the culture. Students are more engaged in class, talking to each other, and even spontaneously playing games during free time. Teachers report it's been the best start to the school year in recent memory because they can focus on teaching. Similarly, a superintendent in a South Dakota district has called their Yonder implementation a game changer. They've seen fewer office referrals and class disruptions, and teachers are freed from constantly policing phone use. Another parent, Alex, will now tell you about what's different about our district and our ask of this committee.
Thank you, Basha.
Hi, everyone. I'm Alex Becker. I live on Todd Morden Drive in Rose Valley. My kids are little, but they'll attend NPE. So, as you heard from Basha, this initiative stands out because unlike most districts that have recently changed their phone policy, it's led by parents. You may have seen our petition circulating the past couple of weeks. To date, we've collected more than 560 signatures. This grassroots support speaks to volumes about the urgency of this issue in our community. Inspired by the successes of new policies around the country and driven by our community's concerns, we propose adopting an off and away all day policy starting in January 2025. We recommend utilizing Yonder pouches and would ask the board to investigate their efficacy, potentially by speaking with other districts implementing Yonder. We would, of course, be happy to put you in contact with anyone we've spoken to, and of course, share correspondence if helpful. The off and away all day approach will, one, eliminate distractions and promote face-to-face interactions between students. 2, reduce the burden on teachers to monitor phone use. 3, create a more focused learning environment. Thinking about implementation, we also hope you will commit to ensuring strong administrative enforcement, providing clear exceptions for medical needs and IEPs, and establishing alternative communication methods for emergencies. We have also put together a document outlining key funding pathways, including possible state grant money, and would love to offer our support in securing this funding if needed, as the deadline to apply for this is coming up on September 26th. We want to be clear. This isn't about restricting students. It's about liberating them to fully engage with their education and their peers. It's about reclaiming our classrooms for learning and social interaction. The evidence shows that these policies work. They improve academic focus, reduce social media-related anxiety, and create a more positive school culture. We have an opportunity to make a significant positive change in our schools, driven by the concerns and support of parents in our community. Let's seize it. Thank you.
Thank you.
And now we have.
A little shorter. Hi, my name is Carla Testa from True Prenny Road, and I have 2 children at West and 1 child at the middle school. Thank you all for your time this evening, and to our speakers, Ryer, John, Basha, and Alex. As a pediatrician, I spend a lot of my day speaking to kids and their families about their overall health and wellness. We discuss nutrition, exercise, sleep, but truly, so much of the conversation surrounds their mental health and wellness. When I see my young adolescent and teen patients, I ask them, take out your phone, can you show me your settings, and then share your daily screen time usage with me and their family. Sadly, I'm no longer shocked by the daily average of screen time that I see, but I do hope this sparks a further conversation with their families outside of the exam room. And by discussing this today and further conversations, I hope we can decrease cell phone time for our students by changing to off and away all day during school hours at WSSD. I know that some of you may have concerns about an off and away all day policy and how it will impact communicating with your children, especially during times of crisis. Our children's safety is always first and foremost priority in our lives. We know that concerns about emergency situations may arise, such as security issues or lockdowns. We all want to ensure our children are safe and that we have contact with them. However, cell phone access to students during this time does not ensure their safety. Instead, it may place them at greater harm. During a lockdown, cell phone use during emergencies can overload the cellular networks and make it harder for first responders to communicate. In fact, we heard from WSSD teachers and the former superintendent that this was a concern during a false alarm event over a fake weapon in the 23 school year at the high school. During these times of anxiety, panic, and crisis, teachers must direct students to calmly follow protocols. When students are receiving conflicting calls and messages from family outside the building, this can place them and others at risk, as the noise and disruption can give away students' sheltering locations. While I wish we never had to discuss these issues, cell phones are not the way to promote nor prevent safety during these situations. Another reason why some may be opposed to this policy is the need to be in communication with their child throughout the day. We recognize not being able to contact your student immediately may be an inconvenience, and this will require a culture shift. But we believe this is a small price to pay for the enormous benefit it offers to students. We recognize that situations may arise where there may be a need for urgent family-student communication, and we recommend administration to establish these alternative methods of communication. And for those who feel it may be sufficient to have the phones away only during instructional time, I urge you to reconsider the importance of our children's development as a whole person. Per the WSSD strategic plan, social emotional learning is a key element of the strong education WSSD offers. This is eroded when students are not interacting face-to-face with each other and instead scrolling on their phones. While we learned many lessons during the COVID-19 pandemic, one of the most vital is the importance of in-person school time. There is mounting evidence that increased cell phone and social media use has negative associations with use, mental health, well-being, and socialization. Let's create an environment that promotes interpersonal interactions rather than quiet hallways and silent cafeterias. And lastly, some may argue that students need to self-regulate and control their own cell phone use. And while we all know that our phones have the focus time settings, we know how easy it is to override and just make one quick click to check that text or notification. As adults, we have trouble regulating our screen time. And I admit that I too am guilty of one more quick scroll that ends up being much longer. As a pediatrician, I would also remind you that a child's prefrontal cortex is not yet fully developed, which is the area of the brain responsible for executive functioning tasks such as organizing and forming ideas, developing strategies, and controlling impulses. In fact, our students' brains are still growing and maturing until their mid to late 20s. Expecting students to consistently resist the temptation on their phones is an environment filled with digital distractions sets up many for failure. Instead, creating phone-free spaces helps students succeed by providing a manageable environment to develop self-control. We recognize that every child and family can make their own decisions and choices regarding their electronic devices. We support families' personal choices, but we ask that during the 7 hours that our children are in the WSSD school buildings, the rules of the school and the focus of all in the building should be on learning, engaging with each other, and positive youth development. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak?
Good evening. My name is Matthew Ruffino. I live at North Princeton in Swarthmore. I'm a parent of a student at SRS, and I appreciate the opportunity to be heard on Regulation 237, in which I'm in favor of making all schools in the district free of these PEDs. My future teenage child may resent me for being here and talking to you right now, but I feel that what I'm advocating for is in her best interest, as well as it's a position based in reason, practicalities, and common sense. It's unreasonable and unrealistic to think that our students or our children can exercise the appropriate amount of discretion in light of the existing regulation as to when and to when not to use it and how to use it. When we ourselves as adults find it so difficult to live up to the most basic standards. How often do you find yourself at a meeting or a conversation with someone, you're talking and you really want your point to be heard, and they just start doing this, and pretend to hear you, but they're not really listening to you. You know, you're at a church or a social setting. You always hear a beep, you hear that call, oops, fumbling in their pockets, trying to turn it off. It's just the most basic things that we all forget because these phones are such an important part of our lives. We have to be reminded while we're driving a car 50, 60, 70 miles per hour to not use our phones. It's crazy, yet we all are guilty of doing it. Something pops up on the screen. Let me switch the channel to the thing. Our distraction, it's really harmful. So it's really unrealistic to think that our children could abide by the existing regulation as to when they should use it and how they should be using it in the appropriate manner. It's unreasonable to present one more challenge to our teachers who are already tasked with handling our children's natural curiosities and imaginations as to what they're teaching and not looking out the window, let alone introducing a phone in a pocket, which is likely burning a hole in that child's pocket to know what is going on outside this classroom. A single phone in a classroom could cause a considerable number of disruptions, not only to the student who's holding it, let alone not using it, but let's say they take that step and use it. It's distracting that student. It's distracting that teacher. It's distracting that child next to them. It could be distracting the child 4 rows for them who's receiving that text or looking at Instagram or other type of social media. It could be distracting a child completely across the building or an entirely separate school who's getting that message. It's an infinite number of disruptions that can occur from a single click by a child or a student, excuse me, who just simply needed to make that message or make that click. So it's unreasonable for them to be able to handle that responsibility. And given the challenges of our facing our teachers, it's unreasonable to ask them to be a phone cop on top of everything else that they're being asked to do on a daily basis. Finally, prohibiting phones from our campuses would also provide an opportunity for growth for our children, in which keeping the phones away from them would create a cooling down period or an opportunity for that child to think about the right thing to do. And that comes heavy into play when we're texting, when we're potentially posting videos, sending videos, creating videos, whatever they do. When the child with the best intentions at a weak moment may do something that they later regret. Keeping the phones out of the schools will give them a cooling down period to hopefully use their common sense and their better judgment as to what they should be doing. It provides an opportunity for them to run into a friend who may talk, maybe a receptive ear for them to talk through their problem, as opposed to instantly reacting with a post, a text, or what have you. It provides an opportunity for our teachers and our other administrators to potentially sense something's wrong, ask what's going on, and allow them to express themselves in a positive manner. It allows them to refrain from making decisions that could have an impact that can't be remedied by a simple, I'm sorry, an unliking of a like, or what have you. The damage is often done once it is done. Finally, this prohibition from phones from our children's schools would allow our children to make the right decision by their own device, which is a critical part of why they're in school to begin with, to develop, to become positive and contributing members of society in which they make the right choice on their own volition, as opposed to succumbing to maybe that need to click, that need to send the text, and first think before you act. I appreciate the opportunity to be heard. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak tonight? Come on down.
Thank you very much, first of all, for doing this, because I've been begging for this for a couple of years now. My name is Mary Ann Gazelle. I live on Yale Avenue. I'm a parent of a 9th grader and an 11th grader at Strathaven High School. I am extremely concerned about the rampant use of cell phones during school hours by students of the Wallingford-Swarthmore School District, especially at the high school and the middle school. Students in both the middle school and the high school widely and consistently use cell phones during instructional time in a way that degrades the learning environment for students and teachers alike. This behavior persists, even though Code 237 of the policy manual concerning electronic devices that was revised in June of 2022 enunciates a WSSD policy to maintain an educational environment that is safe and secure for all district students and free of distractions. Allowing cell phones in our schools is a violation of this policy because students are not being provided with the distraction-free environment that they deserve and the parents expect. Cell phones in the classroom are a major distraction that negatively impacts learning and frustrates teachers. At the middle school, students are encouraged to keep the cell phones in lockers. Excuse me, and the students know that cell phones are not to be used during instructional time. However, most of the students have their cell phones with them, and some use them in class. They place them between the keyboard and screen of their Chromebook, And then when a cell phone vibrates or rings, it distracts the entire class, disrupts learning, often without consequences, as teachers struggle to enforce the current ineffective cell phone policy. Strathaven High School students have no restrictions when it comes to cell phones. Many Strathaven High School students keep their cell phones on their desks during instructional time, as if cell phones were part of the curriculum. High school students walk the halls, heads down, eyes glued to screens, rather than chatting and joking with friends. Why is WSSD allowing cell phones to interfere with the intellectual, social, and emotional learning and growth that students should be benefiting from during the school day? During lunchtime at both the middle school and the high school, students use cell phones rather than having face-to-face conversations. Lunch is a time to socialize and foster relationships, not a time to stare at screens. Why are we allowing cell phones to replace actual conversations and limit social growth of our students? Abundant research-based evidence indicates that cell phone use is harmful to teenagers' developing brains, and it can increase the risk of depression, anxiety, and loneliness. Why are we ignoring this research, along with the recently expressed concerns from the US Surgeon General that cell phones are habit-forming and addictive, as well as contributing to the teenage mental health crisis? The only way to stop students from using cell phones in WSSD during school hours is to create an effective cell phone policy that has defined consequences with strict enforcement. Such enforcement must not rely on teachers, as Jonathan Haidt, a psychologist at NYU, stated that policies that rely on teachers to carry them out become an unenforceable wish. We need true enforcement with meaningful consequences. Now is the time to revisit the WSSD cell phone policies. We cannot wait any longer, as the future well-being and mental health of our children are at stake. We owe it to our students to ensure they receive the best education possible. And we owe it to our educators to provide them with a distraction-free classroom where they can successfully teach our children. Right now, I can only imagine Strathaven Middle School and the high school filled with engaged students chatting, joking, and experiencing real-world social exchanges in the hallways, and focused educators who are excited to teach in a classroom without cell phone distractions. When can WSSD schools begin to make the vision of this vision of education into a reality for our schools? I am ready to help the board members develop and implement new policies for student cell phone use that promote mental health, productive learning, and social being for students and district employees alike. The end. But I appreciate everyone letting us talk about this because it's a big issue.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there anyone else here that would like to speak?
Happy to share thoughts. I'm not on the agenda. I've never been to one before.
So you'll have to wait. You'll have to come up to the podium, and as long as you're a taxpayer or a resident of the district, you can speak. You have to give us your name and the street that you live on in the district. Okay. Excellent.
Hi, guys. Liz Ori again. I'm at Sykes Lane. I'm on Sykes Lane in Wallingford. You guys, I want to applaud your effort. A lot of us old ladies or old parents were worried about this when things kind of just folded into using bringing cell phones to school or whatever. But there didn't seem to be a lot of people talking about it. And I feel like if the parents are aligned, it's going to make this so much easier. And I don't know how the phones off, minds on came to be, if that was your effort or if the district was getting, but I was happy to hear at back to school night that the teachers are that it's making a world of difference already. And, I have a senior, so our youngest is a senior. We're on our way out, so I won't be bothering people. But for what it's worth, just to give a little bit of history, Mary Jo Yannicone, the former principal of Strathaven, held off. We were the last high school in the Central League to let phones come into the schools because parents demanded it. And so I just think we have to get parents on board, obviously. But the trust has to be there too. So hopefully in our rebuilding, of the district. That can be something that's really well established, because if the parents feel like their kids are safe at school and they're being like communicated with in a solid way, they're going to send them off to school. Like our parents sent us off to school, like whatever's happening over there, I'm trusting that they're at school and they're safe. Really quickly, the other thing, like the pouches are really interesting. I just hope that this will be something that takes some time to flesh out. The pouches are interesting. I guess I'm just thinking like of the benefit of cultivating a real understanding, like for the kids to be building a life skill of wanting to have a healthy relationship with their device. This is like a big opportunity, and the pouch, I don't know, like I'm not here to ruffle any feathers. Like I said, I'm on my way. I'm like riding out in the sunset or whatever. But I don't know, just maybe like the idea of phasing something in. I'm a huge fan of piloting. So maybe pilot pieces of it, or if the policy can be written in a way that it can be easily adjusted, maybe the funding could be researched, but it's not activated. Maybe we won't need the pouches. It seems like there might be a different way. And also just like with older kids, I mean, again, my children could be out. I don't know what they're doing right now, but they're not perfect. But we did have a very strict kind of understanding of when phones, social media was like not on the table until senior year. But sort of like cultivating the idea of, I don't know, just so kids understand. Like we said to our kids, we don't give you vodka because it's not good for you. We're not giving you a cell phone because it's not good for you, or we're not letting you on social media. I'm not saying like take the Ori, philosophy, but it's just ideas. Like, let's make this something that they're growing into humans who are then promoting the idea of learning when you're in the classroom, interacting, like putting your phones away. And yeah. Sorry, I just want, yeah. And then just getting the parents on board, like parents texting at school all day. I don't know. It's going to be, it's going to be hard for some people to get their heads around, but hopefully if there can be, again, the reestablished trust and the understanding that this is better for the kids and the teachers and everyone. I'm not trying to put the burden on the teachers to enforce, but there might be a creative way to, take that burden off without the locked pouch. I'm not sure. Anyway, thanks, guys.
Thank you. All right. Anyone else, sir? Yeah.
Has anybody made a debate joke from last night yet? Is there anything that we can safely touch? Hey, I'm Kevin Barth. I live on Ogden Avenue. And I just wanted to share a couple of thoughts. I think it's great that we're here. This is a problem. And I just had a conversation with my son where he essentially said to me, "Why are all you doing this?" Meaning, why are you taking away our phones? And I said, just rest assured, it's because we love you and because we have your best interest at heart. And that doesn't make any sense to you right now. And we can't expect that it will. We can continue explaining it, and maybe eventually over time we will. But I said to him, I said to both of them, we dropped the ball. We dropped the ball. Cell phones came out and we looked at them and we were like, cool, let's go. And the kids got them and we were like, is that okay? So that's okay. We dropped the ball. We'll recover. But I think it's important for them to know that because, and I'm not blaming us, but like, it's just literally what happened. It happened so fast that we couldn't plan for it. I went back and I looked at emails from the beginning of the year. The policy is no cell phones in the classrooms, no visible cell phones in the classrooms, right? So maybe in the pocket, but no visible cell phones in the classrooms. That's the policy, right? Okay. So I think we're here tonight to talk about a new policy. I think that's fine. But I think we need to talk about enforcement of the existing policy. And when I asked, I'll say my kids, because I asked a couple of other kids too, and I've been talking to friends and their experiences, but if the policy is no cell phones in class, just like the policy is no bringing your pets to class, and if somebody shows up with a pet, well, then they get detention, right? So if you show up to class with your cell phone, you have your cell phone, you get detention automatically. And the hypothetical conversation that I had with my kids was, would you stop using them? They said, well, one detention. And I said, no, you're going to get detention every single day. And they said, oh, well, then yeah, I wouldn't use it. Okay. That's a data point there. Because I assume that all of us agree that they shouldn't have cell phones in their classroom, right? They shouldn't be using cell phones in their classroom. That's not even up for debate. I think that kids do have, I think that our children do have the capacity to make decisions when we set expectations clearly and when we set consequences clearly and we carry through on them. When I asked my 8th grader whether or not he uses a cell phone in class, here was his answer. He said, in 5 of them, I don't because I'm not allowed. In 1 of them, I do because I have about 10 minutes of work. So I do my 10 minutes of work and then I turn it in and I wait for feedback from the teacher. Usually takes about 5-10 minutes. During that time, I'm on my phone, listening, watching YouTube clips. He was like, and I'll be honest with you, I'm watching snowboarding. I said, okay. I said, then when she gives it back to you, what happens? And he said, well, then I fix whatever it was for 5 minutes and then I go back to watching snowboarding. I said, so your cell phone is allowed in class? He said, yes. I said, oh, well, that's weird because we have a meeting on Wednesday night to talk about a new policy. He said, and then of course, in this other class, and I won't name it by name, but I can't hide what it is. He said, cell phones are welcome. The students are allowed to use their cell phones. They're allowed to listen to music while they're participating in whatever that class's activities may involve. And they might be physical activities. And he said the rule in the class is just make sure that if somebody walks into the room, you just, kind of overtly, like make sure you get your bud back in your pocket. So quite frankly, new policy, old policy to me doesn't matter. I'd rather talk about consequences for violation of the policy. Because without that, we can come up with whatever policy we want and not enforce it. So we're talking about how much of a burden this is on teachers. And I will be the first one to say, I don't want to put anything more on the teachers, but I don't think we are. They're responsible for managing the classroom, and the kids are not allowed to bring the things that they're not allowed to bring. Maybe pets is a stupid example, but checkers. What if one kid really wanted to bring in checkers and play checkers with us, right? We used to bring in little word games, right? And crosswords, and we would get detention if we got caught doing that during class. I think we need to speak more to the children and understand exactly what's happening and understand what would motivate them and what wouldn't motivate them. I'm totally fine with cell phones not being in the school. Quite frankly, whoever spoke last and the fact that we were the ones who said cell phones must be in the school, that's surprising. I don't think they need them in school at all. First and foremost, though, we got to get them out of the classroom tomorrow. That's silly. As far as the bags, I'm very, very hesitant on them because I think that, again, we're only kicking the can down the road and we're putting on a big show with potentially the same problem we have right now, which is the enforcement, right? So the bags are going to be able to be hacked. Instagram has shown us that. They do break. So what are we going to do when they break? And what happens to the kid who breaks the rules? He doesn't put his cell phone in a bag and he gets caught with it. Then we're going to have the teachers interrogating bags and pockets and how are they going to manage that? So 2 people ago said, can we please just slide gracefully into this bag idea? Because I have a little bit of a hesitation. I certainly have the same hesitation because I feel like we're focusing on policy maybe instead of just simple enforcement of the rules that already exist in our schools for our kids to make sure that our kids are not distracted by their cell phones during class time. I think that's all I wanted to share. Overall, I think it's great that we're here because we do have a problem. These kids' brains are being affected by these freaking things, and we do need to figure this out. And I promised my kids that we would. And they're gonna not like us for a little bit of time, and we should all be proud of that.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Come up to the podium.
Hi, I had no intention of speaking tonight. I'm Dana Pickup. I live on Sykes Lane. Like Liz Ori, I've been in this game for so many years, sometimes more vocal than others. I have a college freshman, I have a junior at the high school, and I have an 8th grader at the middle school. None of them are wilting flowers. And what happens at school, you want to know what's happening with your kids? My kids are probably going to tell me. So I'm aware that my kids are using their phones at school and they don't want to be using their phones at school. They were both, now that I have a junior and a 8th grader, that's obviously where my focus is, because these are the kids I see on a daily basis with my freshmen out of my wings. And they were very excited in the first week of school to come home and tell me that phones were not allowed. It's not an issue anymore, Ma. We can't have them. And they were amped up about this. These are kids who are 14, about to be 14 and 16, and who are really amped up that they can't use phones anymore. Well, that was week 1. So we're at week 3. That's like 15 days because we haven't gone to school every day, right? Guess what? Phones are back. It's not that my kids are using them maybe as they had the free access, in previous years, but they're back. And why? Because last night at back to school night, one of my kids, my 8th graders, one of her teachers said, listen, I don't allow phones. If I see it and it's not being used, I'm not going to come down on your kid. But to Kevin, to Kevin's point, and you inspired me to get up. Why does it have to be so, extreme? We have policies in place now that just need to be enforced now. Because what happens between now and January when we want this next policy with bags to be enforced? Because again, you guys are all probably, many of you are elementary school parents. So the ship has sailed for the middle school and high school parents. Like, I want everything to happen yesterday. I want it to go back to 3 weeks ago when 8th grade and 11th grade came home and representative of their friends as well came home and said, it's not a problem anymore. The fact that they're using the word problem, they were amped up. And then last night to have a back to school night where a teacher said, if I see a phone and it's, in front of the kid, but not being used, no problem. So what happens now? Because I don't want to wait till January. And I also don't want to be the district that's the last one to the party, which is what we keep being, or we're late to the party. Let's be one of the first. I don't necessarily think that we need the bags or the like Yoder, what's it called? Thank you, Yonder. I think that feels extreme. And again, I have older kids, so my conversations are own your shit, excuse me. Like, it's not up to the bag to make you not do something. It's up to your brain to make you not do something. So I want to put the onus on the kid. I don't want the teacher to be tasked with that. I want conversations to happen at home, like the ones that, we all can. It's not hard. So anyway, I just want to make one last comment. Let me, the first time I saw one of the Yonder. Okay, one of the bags was at a comedy show. I don't know, I think it was Chris Rock in Atlantic City. And I was like, whoa, this is crazy. This is amazing. I'm in a theater of, 500, 1,000 people, whatever it was, and people are looking and talking to each other instead of being on their phones waiting for the act to go on. again, extreme. It's felt, I loved that we weren't on our phones, but the bags just feel a little bit like next level. They feel a little expensive. They feel a little fancy. We can do something now that doesn't require bags and money and all the things that go into, you know, whatever the phone bags would be. And last point, I think the middle schoolers have lockers. Why can't the phones just go in their lockers? High schoolers don't have lockers, so it's up to them to use their brains and put them in their bag. And if a high school teacher sees a phone on a desk, give them points against their grade. Give them points. Don't let them be able to make that up. Give them disciplinary action. Have some sort of grounds for, if I do this, there's a consequence. Like, remember those days that we grew up in? You do something and you pay a consequence. So I just kind of want to get back to like grassroots kids owning their stuff. It's possible. I mean, elementary school kids aren't bringing their phones to school. When my kids were in elementary school, they were. There were kids in third grade who openly would get cell phones for Christmas. That's not happening anymore. So let's build on that instead of clamping down, and kind of let kids be a part of this process because they want it. The older ones want it. They pretend they don't, but remember, kids like boundaries. So help us with now, please. And I implore you, Dr. Scanlon, to have these conversations with your principals at the next principal meeting because it comes from on top. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak?
Yeah, I can just stay here.
No, you have to come over to the microphone. It's live streamed. They won't be able to hear you.
Okay, my name's John Perlman, 3 Sharpless Lane. I was not expecting to speak on an issue or anything else like that. I do think this is, I've heard 2 different things about this, 2 different perspectives. The banning, you know, I'm for it, except I had an 18-year-old I work with tell me about the school emergency thing, which I think somebody had, whoever was the pediatrician had a great idea about it, but it was a senior, so they're 18, so what goes with their rights? But I counter that with this, who has had kids go through the district, who works with kids. On the high school level, and maybe the middle school level, those little buggers that they put to their ear lead to a proliferation of cheating. So my head's not going to be in the sand because I went with a high schooler through COVID. And during COVID, it was really easy to sit there on the screen and then hear in the background the cheating. But it's not limited to when you're home. It's just a way to help enforce, to stop the cheating. You take away the phone access. I'm just saying that's just a really negative thing to bring up that kids do. But I think by taking the power of the phone away, it might make them realize they can't cut corners when they're taking a test and in the classroom, which I think they have to learn, because if they start getting away with it, you always worry about their lives. Okay, so just wanted to say that stupid thing.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Was that a no? Here, okay.
My name is Sid Misra of President Avenue in Rutledge. There's a joke amongst data scientists that we present our work only by outlining everything our algorithms can't do. To that, I felt it might be useful to outline various points that I think have come up in today's discussion that, in my opinion, you're not being asked to evaluate in this policy. I don't think you're being asked to evaluate the merits and evils of social media or personal devices. I don't think you're being asked to evaluate a family's choices on whether their kids use personal devices or have access to social media. I don't think you're being asked to find an elegant or perfect solution, whether that be pouches, whether that be bans, whether that be bags, whether that be following the precedent of a neighboring school district. We all expect that this might be a bumpy road when dealing with hundreds of, frankly, addicted children to these devices. It will be bumpy. The question, as I see it, can be far more precise, and that is an internet-enabled personal device? And you might choose to refine that term to be smartphone or personal device or what have you. Is that device, without any school-enforced firewall or restriction, an educational resource? Today, you've heard from a lot of people, lots of evidence indicating that, at the very least, that educational value is questionable. And again, being the data scientist, I'll remain eternally skeptical of whether or not there's even a chance that maybe it actually could be valuable. But at the very least, we can question that educational value. You're also not being asked to implement an unprecedented ban. In addition to the bans that you see in neighboring school districts on personal devices, we have similar bans here in our own school district. I'll make a potentially callous analogy. With my daughter at SRS, we have a nut-free zone. For a nut-free zone, I didn't know there were nut-free zones when I came to the school. I find it a bit inconvenient personally. I have to check nutrition labels. I have to adjust my behavior slightly. If my child were a pickier eater and didn't like wow butter, I would be in a pickle. But I also understand the responsibility that I have to the greater good and to the school at large, and I take that responsibility seriously. And so I follow that ban, even though it may be in my personal view, and I see that I can use these peanut products in any other public setting. And I say, well, in the school, we have certain parameters that we have to follow. And so we proceed with it. And so two, I think all of the, high level ideas that we've looked at in today's conversation about social media and devices and impact on mental health or whatever else it might be, I think you can put all that to the side and just focus on the precise issue at hand, which is whether or not these devices that are at the very least used amply during the school year, during the school day, whether they have the educational value that you intend them to have for the amount of time that they're in use.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Anyone? Bueller?
Just ask a question.
You have to come back to the podium.
Can we engage the student council to help us figure this out?
All right. Is there anyone else who would like to speak tonight? So I have a couple comments, and then I know Dr. Scanlon wants to also speak. Some of you may know I'm a high school teacher myself, and I'm pretty hardcore. Like, I don't want to see them. I don't want to hear them. I don't, and to the point that the boys with their shaggy hair tried to hide AirPods under their shaggy hair. And so I instituted a shaggy hair check, which the kids made me one of these for my desk that says shaggy hair check, because I'm like, you're not getting this past me. Like, it is. So we definitely hear your concerns. We just want to make sure that we are going forward in a, transparent and open, it's nuanced. We want to make sure we speak to the teachers and the staff who are, whatever we ask of them, it will fall on them. And also other community members who might disagree with some of what was said tonight. So, thank you so much for your efforts to present this to us. I think we have a lot to think about. And so, Dr. Scanlon, if you'd like to speak. Dr. Scanlon was going to speak and then you want, okay, Ms. What's that? Oh, okay, so let's go to Ms. Dole.
Yeah, I mean, I just really wanted to thank, I don't think I've ever seen such an organized presentation to the board. I mean, I've only been sitting on the board for 2 years, but this was really impressive. A lot of thought, a lot of just intentional work went into this, and really appreciate that. So I I think I'd like to hear a little bit more about what the next steps will be. I'm sure that that's what we'll discuss, when everyone gets a chance to weigh in, but just thank you again. And look forward to a continuing conversation, for sure.
Ms. Watman?
I wanted to echo the same. This is the most productive, collaborative engagement I have seen in the entire time that I've been on the board, by a lot. And so when we can have that kind of outreach to say, we're concerned about something, can we come to a meeting and talk about it, and we'll be organized about it. It's amazing. And so I really, really thank this group for that. I hope we can do this with other challenges that we're going to face as a district, because it could not be more productive. And I have to thank I've been on long enough. Some of you will remember Jen Lenz, who was the first person to bring this concern to the table, which resulted in the policy we have right now. And I remember thinking, Jen, you're nuts. I don't know how we're going to ever be able to do this. And I disagreed with her for a while, and she pulled me off, like, all right, I'm going to come on board with this. And now it's funny to be here not that many years later and looking at it and going, it's not working. I have one left in the school, and I'm like, why are you texting me? You're at school. What's that about? But yeah, it's not working. It's clearly not working as it was intended. My thoughts have changed a lot along the way. I've read what you guys have shared. And the funny anecdote I saw the other day, I can't remember if it was the New York, I think it was listening to the New York Times on the way into work. And one of the teachers that they had interviewed was talking about how her classroom was noisy again, and how wonderful it was to have a noisy classroom again, because the students were engaging and talking to each other. And that's really stuck with me, just as something that I came across recently. But anyway, I really, really, really want to thank you all for coming and being so collaborative and giving us such rich information to think about and come back to the table with. So thank you.
Ms. Witsak?
I remember clearly Jen Letts, because I sat next to her and she was sort of my mentor as a freshman board leader, because she had no qualms about saying no and voting no and not going with the status quo. And I remember when she presented this, and she got a lot of pushback from it. But she had her research done, and we were able to make a policy that was never one before. And I think one of the parents stressed that it's not so much making a new policy, but like I said on the harassment policy, there has to be consequences. Now the teachers, it's your job to manage the classroom. That's not asking you to do something above and beyond. You should be aware of what's in your classroom. And if one teacher is allowing it and another isn't, that's just disrespectful to the norm of the school. And something should be done about that teacher. And I think that in the AR, because this was just to get a policy on board, just a lot has happened in 2 years because you guys came along. I think that we need to, tonight it's whether or not we're moving the policy. We're just listening. But I think what I'm hearing you say is that you don't want phones allowed in the school. But I just want to ask the parents, how do you feel about monitoring it at home? It starts with you. Your kids are leaving your home with the phone. You're purchasing the phone for a third grader and giving them the right to carry it to school. So as much as we're getting lots of emails like, you have to do something, you have to do something. But it's like what Kennedy said, what can you do for the district? How can you help us help you? Which is starting at home. That you have to explain to your child that off and away means at our household, we're starting this, that there will be no cell phones taken to school. They stay home. Then there's no temptation at all on whether or not they're going to use it because they don't have it. And when they get home, then you decide at home how they're going to use their cell phone. Cell phones are off at dinner time. You have an hour, 2 hours that you can use it before. I mean, some families take the cell phones at bedtime because kids will stay up. Like our high school seniors in wellness were saying they're so exhausted. But if we surveyed them and we asked them, how many of you are still on that cell phone at 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning, talking to Discord chat group, you would find that's what they're doing, and that's why they're exhausted in the morning. So I hear what you're saying, but I also know as far as the pouches, that grant is due by September 26th. But part of the grant is that you have to have a policy in place. So does our existing policy, is that enough to put in for the grant? And because without the grant, we don't have that money to invest. I know some people will say, don't pay administrators more, and you paid the new superintendent this and that, but that's all part of what you need to have a thriving #1 school district is good administrators, and so you pay them according to their educational experience, and that's just the bottom line. But so I can't even say if by 2025 January, yes, we could have a modified extension to the policy that's already written to add in some more, or AR, some more consequences. But if you're talking about the pouch, you're talking about probably 25 and 26 when the grant reopens again, because this is like a pilot program for the state with the money. So I'm sure they're going to offer it again because all the school districts aren't going to, the same situation we have. It's too close to the deadline to get the needed paperwork to apply for the grant. And I'm not saying that Dewana Mosley won't move mountains for us, because she will, but she's also real in saying what can be done and what can't be done. So I just want you guys to understand that it's not time delayed, that it's time investing in what you want done. That it you know, not like it's going to take years, but it's not going to happen quickly. But what we can agree to do is to begin to talk about the consequences that need to be written into the existing policy, and that they will be followed from teachers to principals to administrators to the board. That what we agree on, we ask for follow-up on how it's doing. And I think it is good to ask for student council. We usually have at the board meeting a student representative. So it's something that we can run by her, and then she can take it back to her class, because that's one of the roles that she has as the student representative for the board for the school year. So with that, I'm done my soapbox, and thank you for allowing me the time. And I thank you all for coming and sending your emails, and keep sending them if you want, but I think your point was heard.
Thank you, Ms. Witsit. Ms. Holbert?
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to reiterate that how impressed I am with everybody's, what you've said, whether you planned to talk and had it all written out, whether you didn't plan to talk and did so anyway. Everybody made really interesting, heartfelt, sincere, and well-taken points, I will say. Just the end of last year when we voted on a mental health days, I remember bringing this up, like, maybe instead of this, we should think about cell phones. And maybe that could be part of an overall mental health policy. And I still believe that. So I'm with you. What really resonated was somebody said, you know, the current situation sets kids up for failure. It is the school board's job, I think, to set them up for success. So, when somebody said we owe it to our educators, we owe it to our students, and we owe it to everybody to also listen and make sure that we have incorporated everybody. Like, you all have obviously organized. This is deeply felt. I feel it too. But you know, if we were to pass something very quickly, we would get a whole bunch of parents and students and whatnot out, like, say, what, you know, what's going on? I'm not ready. Like, we need a little bit more time. I know the wheels of bureaucracy and democracy go a little slower than we'd like to. On the other hand, I really like the idea of potentially piloting. Can we get that grant just started and see where we get by September 26th? You know, like, and maybe like for right. And my big focus is primarily on the middle school. I'm happy to discuss any other school, but really the middle school is like where I would love to start. And if, you know, is there a way to make it work? I don't know, but I am super interested. I do see that there are going to be logistical issues with yonder bags. It will need to be thought out. I think that's pretty much it. I just have to say, sorry, my phone went off. I actually have it on mute. And both of my kids have override capability. So my 21-year-old, bless his heart, he's as cheap as I am. He was at a yard sale and he was like, Mom, you should see this stuff. So I'm sorry, I apologize.
Thank you.
Does anyone know if our policy would suffice to apply for this grant? Christina, do you know by any chance, or?
I think it would, and from my understanding, the grant is for cell phone pouches to be locked up and put away in schools. I don't know that is what the big issue is. That's a tangible, without having been through that. Now I worked in a district where we had pouches hanging in classrooms for kids they weren't lockable, but they're hanging up and they check them at the door. And that helped, but the lockable ones, and then are they getting unlocked? I mean, it's another thing to manage. I don't know, without getting input from our staff about all of that. That to me is a nice thing, and I've been around our General Assembly enough years to know that stuff gets thrown into that school code bill, pacify some loud group, but it's not really well thought out, and I don't know that it gets to the problem. Because if they really want to address the problem, they ban cell phones in all schools in Pennsylvania. Okay, so that was talked about, but obviously didn't get that far. So let's throw a grant for what purpose? For pouches? I don't know that. I mean, we can write the grant. We could probably submit it. I think our policy would suffice because we have a policy that says they're not permitted in the classrooms. But then operationally, what's that look like? Without having discussion, with our staff and our community about that. I think there needs to be an education piece. This is, by the way, this is a huge, huge topic worldwide. And there's a lot of research that's being done now. Both of my kids, I have an 8th grader and 10th grader, their schools are no cell phone fly zones. They both got in detention, but so there are consequences. And they did it once, but you know, there's a lot of research out there now, and it's in the last couple of years that's been pretty recent about that. Multitasking and how that affects the brain and how that affects long-term retention for students. So there's some more long-term studies being done on that. There was a big study in New Zealand looking at, it was kind of a meta-analysis of 39 studies. This one just came out just a couple of months ago across 14 countries that found that mobile phone use negatively impacts educational outcomes, including test scores, grade point average, and overall academic performance of kids. So it's a huge problem, more than just Wallingford and more than just Pennsylvania. But there's also studies being done on the monitoring, the implementation phase. So the Pew Research Foundation just did a study for classroom teachers and schools and enforcing these policies about how challenging it is, particularly in high schools. So there's a lot of pieces to overcome, and making a policy is one step, enforcing it is another step, and then dealing with some of the fallout. I've heard from many of you. I have also heard from people who want to get a hold of their kids, and there's another group of people, maybe it's as large as this in this community, that will come out and say, no, don't do that. So a topic like this that is really, I think, critically important for the mental health and the education well-being of students, it deserves more of a community forum to really educate people. You know, I guess Liz, you were talking about parent education and parents need to be part of it. Somebody else was talking, that's what you were saying about parents need to be part of it. It's up to parents. I mean, you can put, there's somebody named Josh Oakes. Has anybody seen any of his stuff? He does a whole thing with, like, you're going to fight with your teens about this. You have control over that. You can limit access. You can put parent controls on some of the stuff they have access to. And he does a whole piece on, you know, from his group called Smart Social on smart use, not no use for parents. It's a parent education that's done. But I think there's multiple pieces. So we got parents have to be involved. Students have to be involved. The staff has to be involved, teachers and administrators. Our middle and high school have started, and you've heard this tonight, screens off, mine's on. The high school is seeing some difference with that. Teachers are seeing some difference with that. And if we can be consistent with that, I hear there might be some breakdown happening on week 3. I'm in the same week the kids are here, by the way. So I'm getting up to speed fast. But I did have a conversation with our middle school principal today about that, and just give you a little more perspective on that. He says phones are away, kids are doing it, but here's an example. Today was picture day at the middle school. You got middle schoolers, right? So kids look pretty good. Kids are on the best behavior day. It was a great day. We should have picture day every day. And as they're coming in, they have to use their phones for the app with the photographer. Okay. But some of the kids are asking, can they ask the principal, is it okay if we, like, they're asking, is it okay to take their phone out to scan the QR code? Now you don't have to, but some are doing that today. But the kids are at the point at this time of year, at least in the middle school, that they're asking, they're a little nervous about taking their phones out. So if we make it a priority and pay attention, and goes back to what our current policy is, we can at least start there. But I think this is certainly a topic, have some kind of educational forum, educate people on the research and the downside of all this stuff. Just like social media is bad for kids too, and there's a lot of research on that. There's a big class action lawsuit with Meta on that. But we also I think we also need like police and EMS with this whole issue of clogging up the networks. Like that, isn't it? That group needs to be part of that educational piece. We need our teachers to talk about from their lens and their perspective, our administrators. We need students, probably pediatricians. Would be great to have pediatricians to do some education on what they're seeing. Psychiatrists, like, there's so many pieces to that where I think we can start this whole educational forum, begin to educate people, much like the later start times where a lot of that research came out and people were coming out and saying, don't change my start times, blah, blah, blah. And the more people started hearing the research, then people were saying, wow, maybe we should change those start times. I think we got to do an educational piece. I'd be happy to start to organize that and start getting the pieces in place for that. School board meetings are great. I got to tell you, you got a great school board here, and they want to listen and they want to do what's best for kids. But school board meetings are not the place to engage in big groups like this because of the limits. You get 2 minutes to speak. It's public comment, not public discussion. I think we need to create a forum and a space to have those discussions. Present the research, do some breakout sessions, get some feedback, have another meeting where you present a different piece of research. I think you need a process and a process that at the end of that, which might take longer than January, but I think at the end of it, you get a sustainable policy and procedure and you get an entire community supporting it. I think then it becomes sustainable and part of the culture. That's what I see.
But in the interim, can we put in some enforcements to the existing policy?
Yes.
That.
And we are having those discussions already. Yes. Yep.
Thank you.
Can you briefly explain the rulemaking, like X's and O's, so people who are not familiar with what's the next step as to what you guys do, or the nuts and bolts, how this thing moves somewhere? Like, is there a second reading? Like, I didn't know what first reading meant or anything like that.
Yeah.
So, like, what's the X's and O's of the administrative?
Great question. And we get so wrapped up in all of our procedures, like any occupation does. For policies, there's actually a policy on how to make policy. Okay. And there's all part of the school code. So we have to have policies and regulations to guide things. Some of this stuff is legislated, comes out of the school code. You heard reference to that. Those are laws that are passed that we then have to have policies to implement. When we do a policy, we do a first reading of a policy. We draft the policy. We do a first reading. We get input. The board then brings it back to the policy committee for a second reading. If there's any changes to it, then it goes to the full board for approval. So that process in of itself is a 2-month process just to change the policy. This particular, and so that's, we had some policies tonight that were first reading. They were policies that for the most part were changed because of a federal regulation change. So we have to come back and add them to our policy. So there's not substantial changes. It's lining up with the law. This is what that was. This discussion about cell phones is not a policy. It is just it's a discussion. So the board is not moving on a first read of the policy. We have a current policy. The board was hearing from people that they wanted to hear some feedback about the policy before we go start making some changes to a first reading. So we have not done a first reading. The earliest we could do a first reading of a policy, if we're going to change it, would be in October. Second read November, and probably by December before, if it goes through. I mean, sometimes you have a board may not send it to the board policy committee, might not send it to the board because it needs more work. It's not going to pass the board. So it could take several months. But so that's the policy piece. That's the process of how policy goes. What I'm talking about is take it out of the policy meeting, have an educational forum where you can actually engage in dialogue and bring that information back to the board policy and say, here's what our community forum and all the people that participated said. So we hear the pros and cons, and we hear the other side too. Because that you got to hear all of it. You got to throw it into this blender and come out with a nice smoothie that goes into the policy. Does that help?
So, I have a question about when you grow up. They're not gonna be able to hear you on the live stream, and we're haven't passed the public comment part, but how quickly can we get that open for that educational forum? Like, that sounds wonderful. When can we do it?
I've done a lot of those in my day, and I mean, the idea just came up right now. So I mean, I'll work on that over the probably next couple weeks to contact some people. I want to make sure we get the right people informed after that. But I think we probably set that up for this fall, yes. If the board is interested in that.
Yes.
Okay.
No, she asked it. I was just gonna say, when do you see this happening? Because he said, like, what are the next steps? So would it be like late October so going into November before Thanksgiving break, you'll have a community forum or? Otherwise, we're going into
Yeah, I would
2025.
probably sometime in October, I think we could set a date. I gotta find a date. I will tell you that in a school district, finding a date where there's not something going on is hard to do, but I would start with that, and then I would start working on communicating with some of these different aspects of it.
Our next meeting is October 9th, so I would expect that we could give an update to the community certainly by then. Yeah.
And you're welcome to come back.
As long as,
Momentum on.
as long as it's like 20 degrees cooler, like I like.
All right, I think we're ready to adjourn.
Yeah.
We're ready to adjourn. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.